Bioshock 2 came out in 2010 as the successor to the wildly successful Bioshock, and even though it's been out for over a decade, there are still some things that you might not know about the game. No matter how many times you've driven that drill into splicers or rescued little sisters, at least I hope you rescued them and didn't harvest them, you monster. Plenty of hidden secrets about the game are hidden in Deco Devolution, the Bioshock 2 concept art book. So, I'm here to tell you the facts you might not know about Bioshock 2, so let's get started, shall we? Here are 25 things you didn't know about Bioshock 2, even if you played it. Andrew Ryan's design in Bioshock 2 is a far cry from the older Ryan we meet and bash to death with a golf club in Bioshock.
Obey!
He's in his prime, as the message from him in Bioshock 2's multiplayer is filmed just before the Civil War broke out. To make him into the butch, masculine pinnacle of manhood he doubtless would have seen himself as, the designers made sure his features were angular, instead of being rounded like you'd expect in at least some aspects of any man out there. But not Andrew. His design is as harsh as his general personality.
Rapture, 1959. May it be our finest year.
The wheelin'-dealin' Augustus Sinclair wasn't always going to end up being turned into Subject Omega. Fans have uncovered a hidden file called girlsyncdies.bic. This video shows Augustus Sinclair tied to a chair in a room and implies, judging by the name, that he would have died tied to this chair, though by what means I have no idea. As the dimensions of the video are the same as the transmissions you view on TV screens in the game, like those from Lamb, it looks like you would have seen Sinclair die from afar while you were fighting through Rapture. Stanley Poole, the slimy journalist creep, was going to be dressed in a bright Hawaiian shirt. It fitted with the time period perfectly, but after seeing it actually on him, it somehow felt too modern for Rapture, so he was put in a dirty beige shirt instead. Whatever that is, it's the opposite of a glow-up.
Just let me live!
I'm really glad this didn't end up coming to fruition for reasons that will become very clear. Stanley was supposed to be Grace Holloway's husband, and they had a child together. No. Hell no. He does not, did not, and never did deserve Grace. The removed audio diary has him talking to Grace about their daughter loving it in Rapture, and their apprehensions about living in the underwater city. No thanks.
How am I going to provide for little Eleanor?
Grace wears such beautiful clothes to mirror the fact that she's never spliced, and that despite the ruin and wreckage around her, she still holds on to her dignity and humanity.
I won't have you touching me.
Sophia Lamb's design was meant to contrast intensely with Tenenbaum in her very precise, perfect outfit with not even a hair out of place. The two are Bioshock 2's main female characters, but their motivations couldn't be more different, with Sophia's utopian cruelty in contrast to Tenenbaum's selfless work for the little sisters.
Remove your helmet.
Yes, we're still talking about all the looks in Bioshock 2, but we're almost at the end now, so let me finish off with Tenenbaum. She isn't as selfish as she is in the original Bioshock, which is reflected in her look. Her hair is swept away in a quick ponytail. She looks like she dressed in a rush in clothes that she doesn't have time to mend, as she's focusing completely on helping the little sisters. Almost every bit of her design is asymmetrical too, to contrast with Lamb's pristine outfit.
Now, we must talk citizens of Rapture.
Some of the splicers were going to have jester-type looks, and I'm so glad that it didn't end up happening because I don't think my clown phobia could have quite survived Splicer Jesters. Splicers were going to be way more inhuman in Bioshock 2, with this prototype in particular being a far cry from the humanoid splicers of the original game. And yes, those are leeches on its back. The idea was that you'd see the leeches in a corridor in Rapture and no one was near. Another prototype had their head being absorbed into their body like a swimming tortoise thing. There were two forms for the Splicer. Inside Rapture, it was upright and humanoid, and underwater, its arms became its finned legs that would propel it through the ocean. Translucency was also going to be a big thing for splicers too. In the end, all this was scrapped because the design team thought that the player simply wouldn't have sympathy for splicers if they looked too inhuman, as it didn't give the splicers an aura of sadness that they wanted the player to feel when they saw them. Drug addict imagery was used instead in certain cases, particularly in the Brute Splicer, who has track marks up his arm. Mr. Brute Splicer says some pretty homophobic things. According to Jordan Thomas, creative director at 2K Marin, the Brute Splicer comes out with this utter BS because he's ashamed and scared of his own homosexuality becoming public in Rapture's unforgiving socio-political climate. That's putting it somewhat mildly, but either way, judging by Thomas's remarks, the Brute Splicer is in the closet. Poor baby Jane. She was this Splicer in Bioshock, and in Bioshock 2 she hasn't really had a glow up. Baby Jane has hair on her shoulders and legs in some concept art because the thinking was that she took plasmids that promised to make her prettier, but instead gave her a hormonal imbalance leading to accelerated growths of hair across her body. That mouth of hers is so large as well because of botched surgery. She went in to get a bigger smile and ended up with that. Possibly Steinman's work, if you ask me. The design team also wanted to push for quote-unquote sexiness in the splicers, so look carefully and in most of them you'll see underwear poking through their garments. I don't know how tongue-in-cheek that remark is, but yeah, really. Big Daddies are the default protectors of Rapture and they look intimidating as all hell. But to push that scare factor even further, one Big Daddy prototype had a World War II style teeth on it, like the kind you see on aircraft. And that was going to be the last thing submarine crews saw before they were taken out by a single Big Daddy for getting a little bit too close for comfort to Rapture. The first bit of the player Big Daddy to be designed, which is you by the way, aka Subject Delta, was the fingertips to the biceps. No body, no face, nothing. These were the things you were going to see the most, so the design team started with them. Subject Delta had an iris aperture in his hand because originally, instead of injecting yourself with plasmids, you would have used parasites that would crawl into your arm. These, I reckon, would have kind of looked like sea slugs, where the Adam originates from. Is it weird that I think they would have looked kind of cute? When you're seeing the world through the little sister's eyes, the Big Daddies would have looked like golden, godlike wind-up dolls, knights in shining armour, or as actual dads, pipe, sweater, and all. Little sisters in Bioshock are creepy. They've got these big bulbous eyes, huge heads, and generally just look a little bit unsettling. Bioshock 2, however, made the little sisters look more human and less creepy with their more realistic proportions and big puffy dresses because they wanted you, the player, to have an instinct to protect them. And it's a lot easier to feel protective of little sisters if they don't look like haunted Victorian dolls. Harsh lighting, a neon diner, and the general maudlin tone gives Pauper's Drop a deliberate noir theme. And if you picked up on that, then it'll come as no surprise that it was even going to have some detective stuff going on in the background too. Pauper's Drop and Siren's Alley was originally one map, but it was simply massive, so they had to split it up into two separate areas. Cognitively intact survivors of the Civil War like Grace are rare indeed, yet in Bioshock 2 you were going to be working much more closely with a lot of them. So there was going to be a guy selling batteries and fresh water in his own little protected booth who you could buy things from. He was going to be one small component of the larger Civil War survivor camps that were going to be dotted throughout Bioshock 2, who traded with each other using the pneumatic tube system snaking throughout Rapture. You would have been able to partake in some trade too, but in the end, vending machines won. The most flooded section of Bioshock 2, apart from that bit at the beginning, is Dionysus Park. At first, however, it was going to be absolutely immaculate and close to perfection, having not been tarnished by leaks or spoilt by splicers in the slightest. All of a sudden, the developers changed their mind about this completely and flooded Dionysus Park, turning it into the area that was almost utterly reclaimed by the sea. Giant puppets roamed around Dionysus Park at one point. No, thank you. There was a bat, jester, antelope, snake, raven, and wolf. And whatever the plans were for the puppets, it sounds like they freaked out the developers enough to make them distinctly relieved when the puppets were removed. Fontaine's Futuristics was designed to have a Walt Disney Corporation vibe, and that's a quote directly from the concept art book. It's all consumer-friendly up front with areas to show off the new plasmids, and then you get behind the scenes where all the dodgy stuff happens. Sounds like most corporations, to be honest, but Disney is a chilling yet realistic comparison. You've heard of little sisters, but what about little brothers? These aggressive protectors of the little sisters were going to replace Big Daddies, but they ended up being a failed experiment. They're mentioned very briefly in the Bioshock novel, but apart from that, they're not mentioned at all in the games. In Bioshock 2, however, there was going to be a section in Inner Persephone that hinted at their existence, but it got scrapped. Bioshock 2's multiplayer was going to have a theatre map where you could manipulate the stage and drop hanging sets to create new pathways, or block some off, or take out a player by crushing them with the set. Turns out that Bioshock 2's single-player team was also doing a theatre setting too, so the two teams arm wrestled over it, and single-player won, so a theatre multiplayer map was scrapped. And that's 25 things you didn't know about Bioshock 2, even if you played it. If you enjoyed the video, thanks very much, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Eurogamer for more videos about video games, as we have a new one out every single day. You can also follow us on Instagram at Team Eurogamer, where you'll get daily updates about the videos we have coming out, when we're doing live streams and glimpses behind the scenes. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go, so remember to stay hydrated, folks, and I'll see you next time.